My name is Audrey Mitchell and I'm 37 years old. I thought I knew what heartbreak felt like until our 10th wedding anniversary dinner at Le Chateau. Andrew seemed distracted all evening, checking his phone under the table. After 5 years of fertility treatments and countless tears, I was still hopeful we'd have our family someday. Then, as our dessert arrived, he cleared his throat and said, "Brittany's pregnant." "It's mine." When I gasped in shock, he actually shrugged and muttered, "Maybe if you weren't barren, this wouldn't have happened." Before I continue this story, if you're watching, please let me know where you're from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button because trust me, when your entire life shatters in an instant, you'll want to know how someone else survived it. I met Andrew Hamilton 12 years ago at a marketing conference in downtown Chicago. I was presenting a case study on digital engagement strategies, while he represented his financial services firm. He approached me afterward, complimenting my presentation with such genuine interest that I broke my rule about not dating men I met through work. That night we talked for hours at a nearby cafe, and I was captivated by his ambition and charm. He called the very next morning to ask me out properly, and our whirlwind romance began. Andrew was everything I thought I wanted: intelligent, driven, and seemingly kind. He surprised me with weekend getaways to Michigan's wine country, remembered my favorite author, and charmed my parents within minutes of meeting them. When he proposed after just a year of dating, I didn't hesitate to say yes. Our wedding was everything I'd dreamed of. A June ceremony in the botanical gardens with 200 guests celebrating with us. I still remember my father's toast. To find a love like this once in a lifetime is the greatest blessing. We spent the first 5 years of our marriage building our careers and enjoying life in our downtown condo with its breathtaking view of Lake Michigan. I climbed the corporate ladder at Davis & Brown Marketing, eventually becoming their senior brand strategist. Andrew thrived at Westmore Financial, making partner in record time. We traveled to Europe, bought investment property, and created what everyone saw as a picture-perfect life. When I turned 32, we decided it was time to start our family. I stopped taking birth control, downloaded ovulation tracking apps, and bought pregnancy tests in bulk. We transformed the guest room into a future nursery in our minds. I could almost hear children's laughter in our hallways. The first few months of trying, we approached it with excitement and passion. Sex was scheduled but still intimate and loving. Andrew would hold me afterward, whispering about baby names and whether our child would have my hazel eyes or his dimples. But as months passed with no positive test, our optimism began to waver. The scheduled sex became mechanical, the disappointment heavier each month. After a year of trying with no success, my OBGYN referred us to a fertility specialist, Dr. Kayla Freeman. I still remember her kind eyes as she explained the battery of tests we'd both need to undergo. "It's important to know we'll be examining both of you," she explained. "Male factor infertility is just as common as female factor." Andrew seemed annoyed by this, reluctantly providing samples and attending appointments. The tests came back inconclusive. Unexplained infertility was our diagnosis. Nothing was definitively wrong with either of us, yet we couldn't conceive. Dr. Freeman outlined our options: ovulation induction medications, intrauterine insemination, or moving straight to in vitro fertilization. We tried everything. I injected hormones into my stomach every night, turning my abdomen into a canvas of bruises. I underwent invasive procedures, endured mood swings from medications, and cried when each treatment failed. Andrew attended fewer and fewer appointments, saying work was too demanding. I administered the shots myself, drove alone to early morning monitoring appointments, and began to feel increasingly isolated in our struggle. The emotional toll was devastating. I joined online support groups and found some comfort in connecting with women experiencing similar struggles. But while I grieved each failed cycle deeply, Andrew became increasingly detached. He'd awkwardly pat my shoulder during my tears, then retreat to his home office. Our conversations about the treatments became shorter, his questions fewer. When I brought up adoption after our second failed IVF cycle, he quickly dismissed it. "Let's just try one more round," he'd say, though he rarely asked about the details anymore. Looking back, I can pinpoint when things truly began to change. It was after our third failed IVF transfer, about 18 months into our fertility journey. Andrew started working later hours, often not coming home until I was already in bed. Weekend business trips became more frequent. He checked his phone constantly, turning the screen away when I entered the room. I'd find receipts for dinners at restaurants we'd never visited together. I tried to discuss these changes, but Andrew dismissed my concerns as paranoia, even suggesting the fertility medications were making me irrational. After one particularly heated argument, he stormed out and didn't come home that night, claiming he'd stayed at his colleague Jake's apartment. I called Jake's wife Laura the next day on a hunch. Andrew had never been there. During this period, Brittany Johnson joined Andrew's firm as his new executive assistant. I met her at the company Christmas party, young, blonde, and noticeably attentive to my husband. She couldn't have been older than 26. When I mentioned her excessive flattery of Andrew, he accused me of jealousy and insecurity. She's just good at her job, Audrey. Not everyone has ulterior motives. I wanted desperately to believe him. I didn't want to be the stereotypical suspicious wife. So I pushed my concerns aside and focused on preparing for our 10th anniversary. Despite our struggles, I believed we could reconnect and find our way back to each other. I spent weeks planning the perfect evening at Le Chateau, the French restaurant where we'd celebrated our engagement. I bought him a Patek Philippe watch he'd been eyeing for years, stretching my personal savings to afford it. The morning of our anniversary, I sent him a loving text message. His reply was brief. Looking forward to tonight. When I called during my lunch break, he sounded distracted and ended the call quickly. Still, I remained hopeful as I dressed in the burgundy dress he once said was his favorite, applied my makeup carefully, and wrapped his gift in silver paper with a handwritten card expressing my enduring love despite our challenges. When he arrived home to change for dinner, he barely looked at me. He claimed to have forgotten the anniversary card on his desk at work, and said my gift would have to wait until the weekend. I swallowed my disappointment and maintained my optimism as we drove to the restaurant in uncomfortable silence. Le Chateau hadn't changed since our engagement night 7 years earlier. He clinked his glass mechanically against mine, taking a large gulp rather than a sip. His leg bounced nervously under the table, jostling the tablecloth. He loosened his tie and cleared his throat. Audrey, there's something I need to tell you. Something in his tone made my stomach clench. I set my champagne flute down, the bubbles suddenly nauseating. What is it? I asked, though part of me already knew. Andrew took another large swallow of champagne. Brittany's pregnant. For a moment, I thought he was sharing office gossip. Then his expression, a mixture of defiance and discomfort, clarified everything. It's mine, he added unnecessarily. The restaurant sounds faded around me. A high-pitched ringing filled my ears as I stared at my husband of 10 years. You're having an affair with your secretary? I finally managed, my voice barely above a whisper. Executive assistant. He corrected, as if that distinction mattered. And yes, it's been going on for a while now. How long is a while? I asked, gripping the edge of the table. About 8 months. 8 months. While I was giving myself hormone injections and crying over negative pregnancy tests, he was sleeping with his 20-something assistant. Were you ever going to tell me if she hadn't gotten pregnant? My voice trembled. He shrugged. I've been trying to find the right time. So our anniversary dinner seemed appropriate? The night I made special reservations and bought you a gift. I could feel tears forming but refused to let them fall. Andrew had the audacity to look annoyed. There's never a good time for this conversation, Audrey. At least I'm telling you now. 8 months, I repeated. What about all our fertility treatments? Our plans? Those were mostly your plans, he said coldly. After the second failed round, I was done. But you kept pushing. His words hit me like physical blows. I was pushing for us to have a family. Something we both said we wanted. Andrew's expression hardened. Well, now I'm going to have that family. With someone who didn't need thousands of dollars in medical interventions to conceive. The tears I'd been holding back spilled over. We have unexplained infertility. The doctor said it could be either of us. Obviously it wasn't me, he interrupted with a cruel smirk. Brittany got pregnant after just 2 months. People at nearby tables were beginning to notice our intense conversation. I lowered my voice. How could you do this to us? To me. He leaned forward, his face flushed with champagne and defensiveness. Maybe if you weren't Barren, this wouldn't have happened. The word hung in the air between us. Barren. An archaic, cruel term ripped from another century, designed to make women feel worthless. 5 years of doctors confirming nothing was definitively wrong with either of us. Yet he had reduced me to this single, hateful word. I stood up so quickly my chair scraped loudly against the floor. My hand shook as I gathered my purse and wrap. I need to leave. Audrey, sit down. Andrew hissed, looking around at the curious onlookers. You're making a scene. You've humiliated me enough for one night, I replied, my voice breaking. I'm not going to sit here and be called names on my anniversary. Where are you going? He demanded as I turned to leave. Anywhere you're not. I walked unsteadily through the restaurant, tears blurring my vision. The maitre d' approached with concern, but I brushed past him into the cool September night. My fingers fumbled with my phone as I ordered an Uber. Grateful One was only 3 minutes away. As I waited under the restaurant awning, Andrew emerged. You're overreacting, he said flatly. We can discuss this like adults. There's nothing to discuss, I replied, not looking at him. You've made your choice very clear. Are you coming home tonight? He asked, his tone suggesting inconvenience rather than concern. Yes, I'm going home. Our home. The one we built together while you were lying to me. My Uber arrived, sparing me further conversation. The driver, sensing my distress, remained mercifully silent during the 20-minute ride. I stared out the window at Chicago's glittering skyline, a view that usually filled me with contentment, but now seemed as empty as my future. At home, I kicked off my heels in the entryway and headed straight for our bedroom. Something compelled me to check the guest room closet, where we stored seasonal items and luggage. There, partially hidden behind winter coats, sat Andrew's suitcase already packed. He hadn't even planned to come home tonight. Our anniversary dinner was merely his convenient exit strategy before moving in with Brittany. I sank to the floor, clutching the suitcase, finally allowing the sobs I'd been suppressing to overtake me. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Andrew's face as he called me Barren, heard Brittany's name on his lips. I alternated between crying and staring numbly at the ceiling, watching shadows shift as cars passed on the street below. By morning my eyes were swollen, my throat raw from sobbing. My phone showed 17 missed calls. My sister Danielle, my parents, my friend Sophia from work. Word traveled fast. I silenced my phone without returning any calls. I couldn't bear to say the words aloud yet, to make Andrew's betrayal real by sharing it. There were also 3 text messages from Andrew. I'm staying at Brittany's tonight. We can talk tomorrow. This reaction is exactly why I didn't tell you sooner. I'll come by tomorrow afternoon to get more of my things. No apology. No acknowledgement of the pain he'd caused. Just logistics and blame. I called in sick to work, something I'd done only twice in my 8 years with the company. My boss Melissa was understanding, though I offered no details. Take all the time you need, Audrey, she said gently. We've got everything covered here. Alone in our spacious condo, I wandered from room to room like a ghost. Everything looked the same, our wedding photo on the mantel, the art we'd collected from travels, the throw pillows I'd carefully selected. Yet nothing felt familiar anymore. I was a stranger in my own life. With shaking hands, I made myself a cup of tea and sat at our dining table, staring at nothing. What had I missed? How had I not seen this coming? The signs were there. The late nights, the secretive phone behavior, the emotional distance. But I'd attributed them to stress and our fertility struggles. Suddenly, I needed to know everything. I went to Andrew's home office and opened his desk drawer. There, I found a stack of dinner receipts, many for tables of 2 at intimate restaurants across the city. Some were from dates when he'd told me he was working late. Others from evenings he claimed to be having drinks with colleagues. The earliest was dated January 15th, exactly 8 months ago, just as he'd said. Next, I checked our joint credit card statements online. Charges appeared for jewelry stores and high-end boutiques on dates that didn't align with my birthday, Christmas, or our anniversary. Gifts for Brittany, bought with our shared money while I pinched pennies to afford his anniversary watch. Most damning was the hotel charge from Valentine's Day, a day Andrew had claimed to be on a business trip to Detroit. The receipt showed a Chicago luxury hotel, just 15 minutes from our condo. He hadn't even bothered to leave town for their romantic rendezvous. Around noon, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Audrey? It's Megan from accounting at Westmore. Megan was someone I'd met a few times at company functions. We weren't close, which made her call strange. Hi, Megan, I replied cautiously. I'm so sorry to call you like this, she said, her voice hesitant. I thought you should know that everyone here is talking about Andrew and Brittany. Apparently, they announced to the office this morning that they're expecting a baby. The way they're acting, it seems like they think you already knew everything. The humiliation burned through me. How long have people at Westmore known about them? Megan's pause told me everything. Audrey, they haven't exactly been discreet. They've been spotted holding hands in the parking garage, having lunch together daily. She started wearing his suit jacket around the office months ago. And no one thought to tell me? My voice cracked. I'm sorry, she said softly. I should have said something sooner. Most people assumed you two had separated. After thanking her for her belated honesty, I hung up and rushed to the bathroom, rushing into the toilet. Everyone knew. Everyone except me. At 3 o'clock, I heard Andrew's key in the lock. I was sitting in the living room, surrounded by credit card statements and receipts. I see you've been busy, he remarked, eyeing the paper spread across the coffee table. When were you going to tell me about Valentine's Day at the Peninsula? I asked without preamble. He shrugged, not even attempting to deny it. It just happened, Audrey. I didn't plan it. It just happened? For 8 months? While I was still putting myself through fertility treatments. While I was still hoping we'd have a family together. Andrew walked to the bar cart and poured himself a whiskey, as if we were having a casual conversation. I tried to be supportive of the treatments, but after a while, it became clear it wasn't going to happen for us. So instead of talking to me like an adult, you started sleeping with your secretary behind my back. Executive assistant, he corrected again, irritating me further. And yes, I should have been honest sooner. But you were so obsessed with getting pregnant, you couldn't see anything else. Obsessed? I repeated incredulously. We made that decision together. You held my hand through 2 rounds of IVF. Andrew, you wiped my tears when they failed. Was that all an act? He looked away, swirling his drink. I did want children. I still do. I didn't think it would be so complicated. Life is complicated. Marriage is complicated. You don't just walk away when things get hard. I didn't want to hurt you, Audrey. I laughed bitterly. So calling me Barren at our anniversary dinner was your attempt at sparing my feelings? He had the decency to look momentarily ashamed. That was out of line. I shouldn't have said that. But you thought it, I pressed. All this time, you've been blaming me for our infertility. Andrew set his glass down and sighed. Look, the fact is Brittany got pregnant easily. The doctors were wrong. The problem was with you, not me. I stared at him, stunned by his cruelty and ignorance. That's not how unexplained infertility works, Andrew. One successful pregnancy doesn't prove anything about either of us medically. Whatever helps you sleep at night, he muttered. I realized then that I was arguing with someone who no longer cared about my feelings or the truth. How far along is she? I asked, changing tactics. He hesitated. 5 months. The timeline hit me like a physical blow. 5 months? But you said the affair has been going on for 8 months. Andrew looked away and I understood. Brittany had gotten pregnant just 3 months into their affair. While I was still giving myself hormone injections and scheduling sex with my husband according to my ovulation calendar, he had already impregnated his assistant. Were you ever going to tell me if she hadn't gotten pregnant? I asked again, needing to hear the truth. Probably not, he admitted. I was comfortable with our arrangement. Your arrangement, I repeated. You mean cheating on your wife while maintaining your perfect husband image. I never claimed to be perfect, he said defensively. You claim to love me, I countered. You claim to want a family with me. Those were lies. Andrew moved toward the staircase. I'm going to pack some more things. I'll be out of your way soon. As he disappeared upstairs, I sat frozen, processing his casual cruelty. The man I'd loved for a decade, built a life with and planned a family with, had been living a double life. While I'd been fighting for our future, he'd been creating one with someone else. The weeks following Andrew's revelation were the darkest of my life. I moved through days in a fog, barely eating or sleeping. My body, already stressed from years of fertility treatments, began to shut down. I lost 12 pounds in 3 weeks. Dark circles formed permanent residences under my eyes. My skin grew sallow, my hair dull. I took a medical leave from work, unable to concentrate on marketing strategies while my personal life imploded. My boss Melissa was understanding, but I could hear the concern in her voice during our brief conversations. Audrey, have you considered talking to someone? She asked gently during one call. The company insurance covers therapy sessions. I promised to look into it but didn't. I couldn't imagine sharing my humiliation with a stranger, having to say aloud that my husband had left me for his pregnant secretary. The words stuck in my throat like shards of glass. Instead, I isolated myself. I declined invitations from friends, ignored calls from colleagues, and gave my parents and sister minimal information. I didn't want pity or advice. I wanted to disappear. My days fell into a miserable routine. I'd wake from fitful sleep around dawn, make coffee I wouldn't drink, and sit on our balcony staring at Lake Michigan for hours. Sometimes I'd replay every moment of our marriage, searching for signs I'd missed. Other times my mind would go completely blank, a merciful emptiness. In the afternoons, I'd force myself to eat something small, a piece of toast, a few crackers before returning to bed. Nights were the worst. Without the distraction of daylight, my thoughts turned cruel. I'd imagine Andrew and Brittany together, her belly growing with the child I desperately wanted. I'd remember every fertility treatment, every hopeful 2-week wait, every negative pregnancy test, now tainted by his betrayal. 3 weeks after the anniversary dinner, my sister Danielle flew in from Seattle without warning. She used her emergency key to enter my condo and found me unwashed, wearing the same pajamas for the 3rd day, surrounded by takeout containers I hadn't bothered to discard. Jesus Christ, Audrey, she said, dropping her suitcase in shock. Why didn't you tell me it was this bad? I didn't have an answer. Danielle sprung into action, opening windows, clearing away trash, and finally guiding me firmly to the shower. While I stood under the hot water, feeling human for the first time in days, she called our parents. By evening, they had arrived from Michigan, my mother immediately taking over the kitchen while my father sat with me in quiet solidarity. Their presence forced me back into some semblance of functioning. I started eating regular meals, changed my clothes daily, and even ventured outside for short walks along the lakefront with Danielle. But the hollow feeling remained, a constant emptiness where my future had once been. During this time, I learned through mutual friends that Andrew and Brittany had moved into a new apartment in Lincoln Park. They were openly a couple now, attending social events together, shopping for baby furniture. The pregnancy announcement had appeared on social media, though Andrew had mercifully blocked me from seeing it directly. For weeks after our anniversary, divorce papers arrived via courier. Andrew had hired Lawrence Bennett, one of Chicago's most aggressive divorce attorneys, known for his ruthless approach to high-asset separations. The papers included terms heavily favoring Andrew. He wanted to sell our condo and split the proceeds, despite the fact that my income had contributed significantly more to the mortgage. He claimed most of our investments were linked to his financial expertise and therefore primarily his. He even wanted partial ownership of a small vacation property my parents had gifted us, but which was solely in my name. Most insulting was the accompanying letter suggesting a quick, clean break so we can both move forward with our lives. As if we were equally responsible for the dissolution of our marriage, equally prepared to move forward. My father, seeing my hands shake as I read the documents, gently took them from me. You need your own lawyer, Audrey. One just as tough as his. 2 days later, I sat across from Patricia Lewis, a divorce attorney recommended by a colleague who had survived her own difficult divorce. Patricia was in her 50s, with steely gray hair and penetrating blue eyes that missed nothing. She reviewed Andrew's proposed settlement with increasing disapproval. "This is predatory," she said finally, setting the papers aside. "He's counting on your emotional vulnerability to push through terms that significantly disadvantage you. We won't allow that." For the first time, I felt a flicker of something other than despair, anger. "He's already taken enough from me." Patricia nodded approvingly. "That's the attitude we need. This won't be quick or pleasant, but I promise you, Audrey, we will protect your interests." With Patricia's guidance, I began gathering financial records, property documentation, and evidence of my contributions to our marriage. The task gave me purpose, a reason to get out of bed each morning. But it also forced me to confront the reality that my marriage was truly over. The full impact of this hit me one evening when, scrolling through email on my phone, I received a notification from a mutual friend's Instagram. Before I could stop myself, I clicked through and saw images from Andrew and Brittany's gender reveal party. Blue balloons and confetti exploded around them as they embraced, her rounded belly pressed between them. Andrew's smile was radiant, more joyful than I'd seen him in years. They were having a son. The boy Andrew had once said he hoped would have my eyes, and his dimples was now growing inside another woman. I dropped my phone as if it had burned me. A keening sound escaped my throat, startling even me with its rawness. I sank to the floor of our bedroom, my bedroom now, and let grief overtake me completely. Hours later, Danielle found me there, curled into a fetal position on the bathroom floor at 3 in the morning. I hadn't moved in hours, my tears long since dried into salty tracks on my face. "I can't do this," I whispered as she knelt beside me. "I can't keep living like this." "Like what?" she asked softly, brushing hair from my face. "Half alive. Haunted. Worthless." The words tumbled out. "What's wrong with me, Danny? Why wasn't I enough? Why couldn't I give him the one thing he wanted?" "Don't you dare," Danielle said firmly, her hands gripping my shoulders. "Don't you dare take his betrayal and turn it into your failure. Andrew didn't leave because you couldn't have children. He left because he's a coward who couldn't honor his vows when things got difficult. But if I had gotten pregnant, then what? He would have stayed faithful, been a good father and husband. Someone capable of the cruelty he's shown you doesn't suddenly become a good person because of a baby." I let her help me up, guide me back to bed, and sit with me until dawn broke. As the first rays of sunlight filtered through the blinds, I realized I had reached my rock bottom. I couldn't fall any further than this moment, hollow-eyed and heartbroken on the bathroom floor at 3 a.m., mourning not just my failed marriage but the children I'd never have with the man I'd loved. The only direction left was up. The morning after my breakdown, Danielle didn't tiptoe around me as my parents had been doing. Instead, she threw open my bedroom curtains, placed a mug of strong coffee on my nightstand, and sat at the edge of my bed with determined energy. "Enough," she said simply. I squinted at her in the harsh morning light. "Enough what?" "Enough giving him power over you. Enough crying over someone who doesn't deserve your tears. Enough letting him steal your present while he's already stolen your future." I sat up slowly, cradling the warm mug between my hands. "I don't know how to stop feeling this way. You start by making one decision that's just for you, not in reaction to him," Danielle said. "And then another and another, until you remember who you were before Andrew Hamilton decided to blow up your life." Her words, though harsh, penetrated the fog I'd been living in. That afternoon, "Just in time," my assistant Jake said, handing me a folder with meeting notes. "The Stevens account presentation needed your touch. Nobody does brand storytelling like you do." For 3 hours, I immersed myself in work, analyzing market trends, refining messaging strategies, collaborating with the creative team. Not once did I think about Andrew or Brittany or the baby. It was like finding a piece of my old self, preserved and waiting for me to reclaim it. After the meeting, my boss Melissa invited me for coffee in her office. "It's good to have you back," she said warmly, "even if it's just for today." Actually, I found myself saying, "I'd like to return next week. Maybe part-time at first, but I need the routine." Melissa nodded approvingly. "Your projects are waiting whenever you're ready. And Audrey, whatever you need, flexible hours, working from home sometimes. Just ask." The company values you even if that jackass didn't. Her unexpected candor made me laugh for the first time in weeks. A rusty, surprised sound. Thank you. For everything. That evening, I told my parents and Danielle I was ready to start handling things on my own again. Though concerned, they respected my decision. My mother stocked my refrigerator with homemade meals. My father fixed the leaky bathroom faucet Andrew had been promising to repair for months. Danielle left me with a survival kit. Bath bombs, luxury chocolates, and a journal with plot twist. I rewrite my story embossed on the cover. Call me anytime, day or night, she insisted as they prepared to leave. Promise me. I promise, I said, hugging her tightly. Thank you for finding me on the bathroom floor. That's what sisters do, she replied simply. Alone again in my condo, I felt different, fragile still, but no longer shattered beyond repair. I started my new journal that night, pouring out my anger, grief, and fear onto its blank pages. The act of writing externalized emotions that had been consuming me from within. My first therapy session with Dr. Anderson proved more helpful than I'd expected. A woman in her mid-50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense approach. She created space for my pain without letting me drown in it. You're experiencing two profound losses simultaneously, she explained. The end of your marriage and the loss of your imagined future as a mother. At least in the way you'd planned. Either one alone would be traumatic. Together they're overwhelming. Will I ever feel normal again? I asked, the question that had been haunting me. You'll feel whole again, she corrected gently. But it will be a new kind of wholeness. The goal isn't to go back to who you were before this happened, but to integrate this experience into who you're becoming. I attended weekly sessions with Dr. Anderson, slowly unpacking not just Andrew's betrayal, but also my complicated feelings about infertility, motherhood, and self-worth. I learned to identify harmful thought patterns and challenge the nagging voice that still whispered I was somehow defective or unlovable. Gradually, I began reconnecting with friends I'd neglected during both my fertility struggles and subsequent depression. I was surprised to discover how many had tried to reach out during my isolation. Sophia from the marketing department invited me to her book club. My college roommate Leah insisted I join her monthly girls' night. My neighbor Helen started texting me to join her morning walks along the lake. Each social interaction was difficult at first. I dreaded the inevitable questions about Andrew or uncomfortable expressions of pity, but I found most people followed my lead. If I changed the subject, they respected the boundary. If I shared a bit more, they listened without judgment. 6 weeks after Andrew moved out, I returned to work full-time. Immersing myself in creative challenges provided both distraction and satisfaction. I volunteered for a new campaign targeting millennial parents, a demographic that would have been personally painful to consider months earlier. Working on the project felt like reclaiming territory, refusing to let my personal trauma limit my professional capabilities. Meanwhile, the divorce proceedings continued. Andrew's initial attempt to pressure me into a quick. Andrew appeared shocked to see me composed and assertive rather than broken. When his attorney made a dismissive comment about my emotional state affecting reasonable judgment, I leaned forward and spoke directly to Andrew for the first time since our anniversary dinner. My emotional state is perfectly clear, Andrew. I trusted you completely, and you betrayed that trust in the cruelest way possible. But that doesn't mean I'll allow you to take advantage of me financially. You've already taken enough. He had no response, merely shifting uncomfortably in his seat while his attorney changed tactics. After the session, Patricia squeezed my arm approvingly. He expected you to crumble. Desperate wife, and he's the reasonable husband who had no choice but to seek happiness elsewhere. Her insight crystallized something I'd been feeling, but couldn't articulate. Andrew needed me to be broken to justify his actions. My recovery threatened the story he'd told himself and others. This realization empowered me further. I scheduled a consultation with financial advisor Benjamin Harper, recommended by Patricia, to secure my financial independence. Benjamin helped me establish separate accounts, create a realistic budget, and develop an investment strategy aligned with my new circumstances. Your financial situation is actually quite strong, he noted during our meeting. There's no reason you can't emerge from this divorce in excellent financial shape. As the legal and financial aspects of separation progressed, I also sought emotional outlets. I remembered how painting had once been my passion before career and marriage consumed my free time. One Saturday morning, I visited an art supply store and purchased canvases, acrylic paints. My first attempts were awkward, stilted still lives and hesitant landscapes. But the act of creating something, of watching blank canvas transform under my hands, provided a kind of meditative peace I'd forgotten existed. I didn't need to be good. I just needed to express myself. During this period, I also discovered an online support group for women experiencing infertility and divorce simultaneously. A surprisingly common combination. Reading their stories made me feel less alone, less uniquely cursed. Many had rebuilt satisfying lives after similar betrayals. Some had eventually become mothers through various paths. Others had found fulfillment in different ways. I found myself sharing my story for the first time in a public setting. The anniversary dinner, the cruel Barren comment, the discovery of Andrew's packed suitcase. The worst part wasn't even losing him, I admitted to the group. It was realizing that while I was fighting for our future family, he had already created one with someone else. It made me question everything. All those doctor's appointments he'd attended, all those times he'd held me after negative pregnancy tests. Was he already seeing her? Already planning his escape? A woman named Tanya reached out and squeezed my hand. You'll probably never know the exact timeline of his betrayal. And that's part of the pain, the retroactive questioning of every memory. But at some point, you'll stop needing those answers to move forward. Her words stayed with me. A promise that the constant circular questioning would eventually cease. That night, I took Jasper, the golden retriever mix I'd adopted from a rescue organization the previous week, for a long walk along the lakefront. As he bounded joyfully ahead of me, investigating every interesting scent, I realized I hadn't cried over Andrew for an entire day. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. 6 months after our anniversary dinner, I felt like a different person. Regular therapy, meaningful work, reconnected friendships, and Jasper's unconditional love had helped rebuild my sense of self. I'd redecorated the condo, but enough to remember I could enjoy male company without comparing everyone to my ex-husband. The divorce proceedings continued, moving slowly but steadily in my favor. Andrew's initial aggressive stance had softened as Patricia methodically presented evidence of my substantial contributions to our shared assets. His lawyer had suggested a more equitable division. We were celebrating her promotion to creative director at a rival marketing firm. A bittersweet moment since I'd missed working with her, but was genuinely happy for her success. We had just ordered our entrees when I saw them enter the restaurant. Andrew and Brittany, her pregnancy now obvious in a form-fitting red dress. They hadn't noticed us yet. I would have fled immediately, unable to bear being in the same room with them. But now, I felt something different. Not comfortable certainly, but not devastated either. No, I decided. This is your celebration. I'm not letting them ruin it. We continued our dinner, though I found it difficult to focus on conversation with Andrew and Brittany in my peripheral vision. I was reaching for my water glass when I noticed Brittany heading toward the restrooms, on a path that would take her directly past our table. She saw me at the same moment I saw her. Her steps faltered briefly before she continued forward, one hand resting protectively on her rounded belly. As she drew near our table, I saw something unexpected flash across her face. Not triumph or smugness, but discomfort. She might have passed without speaking if I hadn't made the split-second decision to acknowledge her. Hello, Brittany. She stopped, clearly uncertain about the social protocol for greeting your lover's not-quite ex-wife. Audrey. Hi. You look good. Thank you, I replied evenly. Congratulations on your pregnancy. Her hand moved in small circles over her belly, a gesture I recognized from pregnant friends, something between protection and pride. It's a boy, she offered awkwardly. So I heard, I said, maintaining eye contact. Before she could respond, Andrew appeared at her side, having noticed our interaction from across the room. Surprising myself with my calm tone. Sophia and I are celebrating her promotion. Sophia raised her wine glass in a mock toast, her expression making it clear she was unimpressed by either of them. We should get back to our table, Andrew said to Brittany, placing his hand on the small of her back possessively. Something about that gesture so familiar. Woman to woman. She froze, eyes widening. Andrew stepped slightly in front of her, as if to shield her from whatever verbal attack he anticipated. I don't know what Andrew has told you about me or our marriage, I continued steadily. But I suspect it's a carefully edited version that casts him as the victim of an obsessive, fertility-crazed wife. That's not the truth, but you'll discover who he really is soon enough. You don't know anything about our relationship, Andrew interjected, his face flushing. You should move on, Audrey. You're making a scene. I smiled slightly, remembering he'd said those exact words at our anniversary dinner. I'm simply having a conversation. If that constitutes making a scene, perhaps you're the one who's overly emotional. Brittany shifted uncomfortably. Andrew, it's fine. It's not fine, he snapped. I maintained my composure, addressing Brittany directly. I don't wish either of you ill. In fact, I hope for your son's sake that Andrew becomes a better man than he's been to me. But fair warning. When things get difficult, and they always do with children, pay attention to how he responds. Does he support you, or does he look for escape routes? Andrew's face contorted with anger. That's enough. You're unhinged, Audrey. This is exactly why. Why you cheated. Why you lied for months. Why you called your wife of 10 years Barren on our anniversary. I interrupted, my voice remaining calm despite the emotions churning beneath the surface. No, Andrew. Your choices are on you. Not me. Several nearby diners were now watching openly. Andrew, always conscious of appearances, grabbed Brittany's elbow. We're leaving. I'll talk to my lawyer about this harassment. As they turned away, I called after them. Congratulations again on your baby, Brittany. I truly hope motherhood brings you joy. After they left, settling their bill hastily and departing without eating, Sophia reached across the table and squeezed my hand. That was the most dignified takedown I've ever witnessed. Acknowledging their future child. And survived intact. More than survived. I'd maintained my dignity while speaking my truth. 2 weeks later came the final divorce court date. Andrew had made a last-minute attempt to claim partial ownership of stock options I'd received through my company before our marriage. Patricia had assembled comprehensive documentation proving these were separate property, but Andrew's lawyer argued they had appreciated during the marriage due to his financial guidance. The courtroom was austere and impersonal, nothing like the dramatic scenes from television. Andrew sat across the aisle with his attorney, occasionally whispering comments while glancing in my direction. He'd expected me to accept his terms to avoid precisely this public reckoning, but I'd refused to be intimidated. Judge Marilyn Winters, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, listened to both sides with impassive attention. When Andrew's lawyer finished his argument about the stock options, Patricia stood and methodically dismantled his claims. Patricia continued, "We have uncovered evidence that Mr. Hamilton has been moving marital assets to private accounts for the past 9 months. Well before he informed Mrs. His lawyer leaned over to whisper urgently in his ear, clearly surprised by this revelation. Judge Winters reviewed the documents with narrowed eyes before addressing Andrew directly. Mr. Hamilton, did you establish this separate account with the intention of shielding assets from equitable distribution? Andrew cleared his throat uncomfortably. I was simply organizing my finances in anticipation of changes in my family situation. Before informing your wife of those changes, the judge asked pointedly, which remained solely mine, I would retain ownership of our condo, with Andrew receiving appropriate compensation from other assets. Most significantly, Andrew would be responsible for all legal fees due to his attempted concealment of assets. The court takes a dim view of parties who attempt to hide marital property, Judge Winters concluded. Had Ms. Lewis not discovered these accounts, the distribution might have been quite different. As we stood to leave, I caught Andrew's expression, a mixture of disbelief and fury. He had entered our marriage assuming control, maintained that control throughout our relationship, and expected to dictate the terms of its end. His final attempt to manipulate the outcome had backfired completely. Outside the courthouse, Patricia shook my hand warmly. Congratulations, Audrey. You stood your ground and received a fair settlement. Not all divorce cases end this justly. Thank you for everything, I replied sincerely. I couldn't have done this without you. You're stronger than you know, she said. Most clients come to me broken and leave merely functional. You've done more than survive this process. You've reclaimed yourself. That evening, as I walked Jasper along the lakefront path, my phone pinged with an unexpected text from an unknown number. Opening it, I was shocked to see it was from Brittany. Audrey, this is Brittany Johnson. I got your number from Andrew's old contacts. I want to apologize. When we started seeing each other, Andrew told me you two were separated and getting divorced. But I thought you should know he lied to me too. I'm sorry for the pain we caused you. I stared at the message for a long time, unsure how to respond or whether to respond at all. Another part recognized that her deception, while painful to me, was ultimately Andrew's responsibility. In the end, I simply replied, "Thank you for your apology. I wish you and your son well." Then I blocked the number. Not out of anger but self-preservation. Their story was no longer part of mine. That night I changed the locks on our condo, now legally mine alone, and stood in the entryway of my home, feeling a profound sense of security and ownership. The space that had once felt haunted by memories now felt like a sanctuary. For the first time since that devastating anniversary dinner, I felt truly completely free. 1 year after the anniversary dinner that shattered my world, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror. The weight I'd lost during those dark months had been replaced by muscle from regular yoga and lakefront runs with Jasper. Happy new anniversary, I said to my reflection. The past year had transformed me in ways I couldn't have imagined during those initial weeks of devastation. My career had flourished. I'd been promoted to creative director at Davis & Brown following a campaign that had earned industry recognition. My social circle had expanded beyond work colleagues to include friends from my support group, neighbors I'd finally taken the time to know, and fellow artists from the community studio where I now painted weekly. Most profoundly, my relationship with my body had healed. For years, I'd viewed myself primarily as a failed vessel, unable to fulfill what I perceived as my biological purpose. Each month without conception had felt like a personal shortcoming, despite doctors repeatedly explaining that unexplained infertility wasn't anyone's fault. Dear Anderson had helped me recognize how I'd internalized society's message that a woman's value was tied to her reproductive capacity. The term barren that Andrew used, she pointed out during one session, carries centuries of patriarchal judgment. It reduces women to their ability to produce children for men. Gradually, I'd reclaimed my body as my own, not a defective reproductive system, but a strong, healthy vessel carrying me through life. I started treating it with kindness instead of disappointment, appreciating what it could do rather than focusing on what it couldn't. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I'd scheduled a consultation with Dr. Meera Patel. Patel had outlined several possibilities: donor sperm and IVF, embryo adoption, traditional adoption, or child-free living. Each path had its challenges and benefits, its costs and uncertainties. Rather than rushing into a decision, I took information packets on each option, promising myself time to reflect. After careful consideration and discussions with Dr. Anderson, but unlike the fertility treatments that had left me feeling broken and desperate, each step of the adoption process filled me with purpose and hope. My support group had proven invaluable during this journey. What had begun as informal gatherings of women sharing similar experiences had evolved into an organized network called New Chapters, women supporting each other through infertility, divorce, or both. We met twice monthly in a community center room, sharing resources, advice, and understanding that even well-meaning friends and family couldn't provide. As our group grew, I found myself taking on a leadership role, coordinating speakers and resources. Helping others navigate their own painful transitions gave meaning to my experience. Most of us could barely get out of bed. Now look at us. Indeed, the transformation was remarkable. Women who had first arrived with tear-stained faces and hunched shoulders now stood tall, laughed freely, and supported newcomers with the compassion of those who truly understood the journey. In late summer, I attended an adoption information session at the Chicago Family Connections Center. The room was filled with prospective parents, some couples, some single like me, all nervously clutching folders and notepads. As the presenter discussed the emotional challenges of the adoption process, we introduced ourselves. Dr. Nathan Reed, pediatrician and fellow adoption hopeful. His kind brown eyes and gentle manner immediately put me at ease. Over coffee, we discovered shared experiences. Both divorced after long marriages, both healing from betrayal, both determined to become parents despite complicated paths. My ex-wife decided 2 years into our marriage that she didn't want children after all, he explained without bitterness. Rather than discussing it, she had an affair with a colleague who'd had a vasectomy. Guaranteed childlessness, I suppose. My ex-husband decided the opposite, I shared. He wanted children. Just not with me and my apparently insufficient reproductive system. Nathan winced sympathetically. People can be unbelievably cruel when they're trying to justify their own bad behavior. Our conversation continued long after the session ended, moving to a nearby cafe where we exchanged contact information. Not as potential romantic partners, we were both clear about focusing on our adoption journeys, but as friends navigating parallel paths. Over the following months, Nathan and I developed a supportive friendship. We attended adoption workshops together, texted each other encouragement during challenging paperwork phases, and occasionally met for coffee or walks with Jasper. His perspective as both a pediatrician and prospective adoptive parent provided valuable insights. My sister Danielle commented during one of our weekly calls, "The way you talk about Nathan sounds like more than friendship. We're both focused on becoming parents," I replied automatically. Romance isn't on either of our priority lists. Maybe not intentionally, she said. But sometimes the best relationships develop when you're not looking for them. Her words lingered with me, though I pushed them aside. My life had finally regained stability and purpose. I wasn't ready to risk my heart again, not when it had taken so long to piece it back together. In early spring, we have a potential match for you. A birth mother in Arizona reviewed your profile and would like to speak with you. She's due in 2 months with a baby girl. The world seemed to stop momentarily as her words sank in. A baby girl. A mother who had chosen me from dozens of waiting families. A chance to become the mother I'd dreamed of being for so long. Her name is Lily, Sandra continued. She's 19, a college student who wants to complete her education. She's been very clear about wanting an open adoption with occasional updates and photos. Yes, I breathed, my heart racing. Yes to everything. When can we speak? The following days were a whirlwind of phone calls, video chats, and preparations. Lily was thoughtful and articulate, asking insightful questions about my life, values, and how I would explain adoption to her daughter. I found myself admiring her courage and clarity at such a young age. "I'm so happy for you. I'm terrified and excited and overwhelmed," I admitted. What if I'm not ready? What if Lily changes her mind? What if everything works out exactly as it should? A reminder of how far I'd come from the shattered woman on the bathroom floor. That evening, I sat in the nursery I'd tentatively begun creating in the former guest room. The walls were painted a soft sage green, gender neutral until I knew more. Now I could add the finishing touches, knowing a baby girl would soon occupy the crib by the window. As I sat in the rocking chair, gazing at the photo Lily had sent of her latest ultrasound, I felt a profound sense of rightness wash over me. The path to this moment had been nothing like I'd imagined, marked by betrayal and grief rather than the shared joy I'd once envisioned with Andrew. Yet somehow this felt more authentically mine. I wasn't becoming a mother to fulfill someone else's expectations, or to complete some socially mandated checklist of adult accomplishments. I was choosing motherhood for myself on my own terms. I thought back to that devastating anniversary dinner, to Andrew's cruel dismissal of me as barren. The word that had once cut so deeply now seemed laughably inadequate to describe me. The period of greatest pain had ironically become the most fertile season of personal growth I'd ever experienced. My phone chimed with a text from Nathan. "Dinner tomorrow to celebrate your news?" That night I added a final entry to the journal Danielle had given me a year earlier. The one with plot twist. I rewrite my story on its cover. "Dear baby girl," I wrote. "I don't know your name yet. That's something I'll decide when I meet you. But I want you to know that you are already deeply loved. Your story begins with tremendous courage. The courage of your birth mother to make an impossible choice, and my courage to keep believing in love after heartbreak. Someday when you're old enough, I'll tell you how you came to be my daughter. I won't hide the difficult parts, because they're what made this joy possible. I want you to know that happiness often arrives in unexpected packages, that families are created in countless ways, and that the word barren doesn't mean empty or lacking. It means ready for new growth, waiting for the right season to bloom. As I finished writing, I gazed at the ultrasound photo once more. In a little over 2 months, I would hold my daughter for the first time. The journey to her had broken me open, stripped away pretense and false security, and rebuilt me stronger than before. For that painful gift, I was paradoxically grateful. Thank you for following my story through its darkest moments to this new beginning. If you've experienced heartbreak or betrayal, please know that healing is possible. The path isn't linear and some days will still bring tears, but keep moving forward one step at a time. I'd love to hear in the comments about your own journey of recovery, or how you found strength after devastation. Don't forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and share it with someone who might need to be reminded that their worth isn't defined by someone else's betrayal. Remember, sometimes the most beautiful chapters come after the plot twist you never saw coming.